Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our Black History Spotlight event. We are proud to present this morning a brief interview with someone who will really be able to bless us this morning. Her name is Sandra Morgan, and she is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Outreach at Kent State University College of Arts and Sciences. But more importantly, this morning, she is the granddaughter of Mr. Garrett Morgan. So good morning, Sandra. How are you?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I am well and very happy to be here.
Oh, great to have you here. So basically, we just want to get into it. And the first question I want to ask you is, tell us about uh, Mr. Morgan. Tell us about Garrett Morgan, his early life.
Well, Garrett Morgan was born in Kentucky. He was born in a town called Claysville, which now is a part of Paris, Kentucky. It's outside of Lexington. He grew up in a large family. There were, different reports, but between 9 and 13 children in his family. So it was quite a large family. And he was number 7. That is indisputable, we know, of his siblings. He went to elementary school in Kentucky. He actually went to the school was called the Branch School for Colored Children, where reportedly he was a good student and curious and very smart. But Kentucky wasn't the place for him. He thought that maybe it was time of Jim Crow and that sort of thing, and he wanted to go somewhere where there's a little more freedom and where he could really use his intellectual abilities more. So he moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. And he was about 16 years old when he made that move. Moved to Cincinnati, stayed there for about a year or so, also, and did well there, but also thought that there were better opportunities elsewhere. He'd heard an awful lot about this big city with bright lights called Cleveland, a little bit to the north, and he thought, well, there was a lot going on in Northeast Ohio at the time. It was the time of Edison, of the Rockefellers. J.P. Morgan had a huge influence in Northeast Ohio at the time. There was a lot going on here, and he thought it was the place for him. He really wanted to be a part of the action and see, look for his fortunes elsewhere. So he moved to Cleveland.
Okay. So let's skip ahead and how did he make his mark? How did he get started in the field of inventions?
Well, I'll tell you, it really was kind of happenstance for him, and he never really considered himself a great inventor. He came to Cleveland because he thought that there were business opportunities available for him. He considered himself an entrepreneur. And so among his first jobs, he worked for a couple of textile companies. Textiles were very big in Northeast Ohio at the time. And there were a lot of seamstresses and others who came from Eastern Europe to kind of feed the industry. And so he worked for a company literally sweeping floors, and doing other menial kind of tasks. But he noticed that, the sewing machines would go down periodically. And it was because of the way that they were configured, the belts on the sewing machines. And so he had a bright idea, and he played around with it a little bit, and ultimately devised a new type of belt for the sewing machine, which was made out of rubber. It was continuous, so there were no weak spots or places for the rubber to break. And he also configured it as a figure 8 on the wheel of the sewing machine, so that I guess tension was evenly distributed. And that technically was his first invention. The company that he worked for was delighted by this. It really increased productivity, and helped everyone. And they told him, well, this is a great idea. They gave him a $150 bonus for coming up with the idea. And he got a promotion. And that's when he thought, Eureka, I've got something here. I'm in modern terms, I'm a maker and a thought leader. And so with that knowledge, I think it gave him the confidence to think about other things. So really then, if we move on to both the gas mask and the traffic signal, or the Garrett Morgan safety hood, which was the precursor to the gas mask, and the tri-position traffic signal, he was really looking at problem solving. It wasn't so much that, oh boy, I've got a bright idea, we should do this. It was more, we have some safety issues, because both of these were related to public safety. If you think about it, we have safety issues that we need to address. How are we going to do that? And what are the best mechanisms for doing that? And he looked to the past. He looked to other inventions, and other apparati that were being used, and looked for ways to improve them. And both of his major inventions, the patents that he received, were really based on radical improvements on existing technology.
Wow, that's amazing. That and specifically when you talk about the mechanical traffic control system, that's I think is probably what he's most known for in this area. With our transportation department for the city, of
Correct.
course, they have really built upon that. Now, in addition to the traffic signal and the gas hood, I understand that he also immersed himself into, of all things, hair care.
That's right. And again, it was it was by happenstance. He was in, so if we go back to the fact that he started his career in the textile industry, and I'm just going to give you a quick little story here because it's important ultimately to this story. My grandfather met my grandmother in one of these textile factories. And she was Bohemian, from what is now the Czech Republic, but she was from Bohemia in the Czech Republic. And of course, he's African American. Well, that didn't go over very well, within the organization. And so they pulled him aside and told him, you know what, you have to end, what's the matter with you? Stop talking to her. You have to end this romance, otherwise you're going to get fired. Well, my grandfather was, number one, headstrong, but number two, he was in love. And so he said, fine, you don't have to fire me. I quit. I'll find something else. And so he quit his job. And my grandmother, who was equally headstrong and who was facing quite a lot of headwinds, I will say, from her family, they were not at all excited about this relationship, said, you know what, I quit too. And they both quit their jobs at this factory. And then they were married, but that left them with needing to have a job, needing to have something to do. And my grandfather thought, well, you know what, I'm going to start my own business. I don't need to work for anyone else. That was his goal in the first place, was to explore entrepreneurship. And so they did all kinds of things. I mean, he was a little bit of a hustler, right? He had a chicken, a store that sold chickens and eggs and all that. They also did piecework for one of the local factories here, the Richmond Brothers, and ultimately established their own sewing workshop and opened up a little clothing store of their own. So while my grandmother was doing piecework, they realized that the machines would go very fast, and the needles, were metal, and they would scorch the cotton, sometimes, and leave little scorch marks on the fabric. So really, he was looking for a lubricant, for the needle that would keep it from scorching the fabric, so that it wouldn't leave marks on the fabric. Now needles are coated with silicone and that sort of thing, so that it doesn't happen. But it was during that time that he was testing out all kinds of different potions, if you will, that he had something on the side. He was putting it on needles. My grandmother called him to lunch. He wiped his hands on a piece of lamb's wool and went in, washed his hands, ate his lunch, came out. The lamb's wool was smooth. He thought, oh, this is interesting. He called over their dog, which was an Airedale, put a little on its fur, and the dog's fur flattened out too, straightened out, silky smooth. He thought, hmm. So then he took this stuff into the house, went into the bathroom, and put it on his own head. Much to the chagrin, I mean, my grandmother was outside telling him, stop, don't put that on your head. What's the matter with you? But he did it anyway. And his hair straightened out. And he thought, okay, I can market this to people as a hair straightener. And he did. And that he tinkered with the formula, of course, but he then decided to go into the hair care business. And, this was at the time when he's seeing the success of C.J. Walker, Madam C.J. Walker, and many others. So he developed not only this hair straightening cream, but he also had the famous Garrett Morgan black hair oil stain that was gentle enough to use even on your beard and mustache, and a whole line of pomades and hair creams, lip pomades and other things. And he sold them, all over Ohio, of course, but up and down the East Coast, which was a great business for him. It actually turned out to be extremely profitable for him. That company, the Garrett Morgan Hair Refinery, stayed in business until 1976.
Wow, it's just amazing the backstory on how these things come to fruition. So basically, a lubricant from the sewing machine basically became a hair care product. That's amazing.
That's right. And some of the stories are fantastic around it. I mean, it was at a time when men wanted to slick their hair back, and so honestly, the product was originally marketed towards men, not women.
Yeah.
And as my great uncles would say, they would get together on Thursday nights and put it on each other's hair, and straighten out their hair, so that they'd be ready for all the fun parties and going out on, over the weekend. And my grandfather also had a cap. It looked like an old-fashioned football helmet. It wasn't made of leather, but it was a fabric helmet, essentially, that after you put this cream on your hair, washed it out and slicked your hair back, put a little pomade on, and then you'd put on this helmet, strap it under your chin, and wear it to bed. And in the morning, when you woke up, your hair was lying flat and ready for the day. And he also came up with one that if you wanted a little wave, he sewed literally pipe cleaners in between the fabric, so you could put that one on, and then you would have waves the next morning.
Wow. So for my fellow Generation X guys, that basically was the predecessor of the wave cap.
Precisely.
Wow. So tell me, with all of this that I've heard about him so far, tell me about his personality outside of the laboratory, because it sounds like that it was pretty interesting, his personality.
Well, he was a very thoughtful man, curious and interested in lots of things, and very observant. And I guess that you'd have to be observant and curious, to come up with the ideas that he had, both around my examples of the sewing machine loop, the hair care products, as well as the safety hood and the traffic signal. He was thoughtful and always thinking. He could be a lot. He could be very intense as a person, but he was also very, very funny. So he had a great sense of humor, as I understand it. He was, again, very thoughtful and observant and curious, and rather intense.
Wow. Well, with the way that his mind works, I guess I definitely would not want to be the target of one of his practical jokes. So if Garrett Morgan was here with us today, how do you think he would view, his inventions, the gas hood, the mechanical traffic control system, hair products. How do you think he would view what they have emerged to today?
Well, I think that he'd be very excited and very proud of his contribution to public safety today. One of the good things is that, he received his patent in 1923 and he didn't die until 1963. So he actually saw quite a lot of technological advancement with both the gas mask and with the traffic signal over the course of his lifetime. And he appreciated those transformations and the innovation that came along from his original idea. So I think that he would be very excited and very happy about this current generation of traffic signals and of the gas masks, and might even have some ideas of his own of ways for greater improvements.
Well, I think that's awesome that he was able to live long enough to, see what his inventions have led to.
Mhm.
And now that you say that, in the age of mobile devices and internet streaming and everything, there's no telling what he might have been able to do with this.
Yeah, I have no doubt that he would still be an innovator were he here. He'd be very old by now, but if he was able to right now, I think that he would still be an innovator and thinking of new and interesting things to contribute.
Okay. Well, my last question for you is there any, can you share just a little known fact that, that no one else may know about your grandfather, one that we can depart with today?
Well, I mean, I think that he was there were a lot of little things about him, but I think that at the end of the day, he had he had a lot of chutzpah, for lack of a better term. A story comes to mind, for me that it- you know as I said, back in the day here in Northeast Ohio, there was a lot going on, between the Edison shop and just everything. And J.P. Morgan spent a lot of time here in Northeast Ohio at that time. He was an investor in the Edison workshop. And so there were stories about him all the time in the newspaper. And my grandfather read that he was a sportsman and enjoyed hunting. And so my grandfather um, got a couple of hunting dogs, nice ones, and had them delivered to J.P. Morgan with a note saying, I understand that you like to hunt. I'm also a hunter. My grandfather actually loved horses. And being from Kentucky, I think that makes sense, right? But sent him a note. I'm also an outdoorsman. I like horses. I like hunting. Please accept my gift of a couple of hunting dogs. J.P. Morgan, I think, was so intrigued and so surprised, he accepted the gift of the hunting dogs, and actually had a conversation with my grandfather. My grandfather then proceeded to share with him, about his business and that sort of thing. And I think that they had actually apparently a really great conversation because when my uncle was born, my grandfather's first son, he named him John Pierpont Morgan. He did not name him after himself. His second son, my father, he named Garrett Morgan Jr., but his first son, he named John Pierpont Morgan. He then sent a note again to J.P. Morgan and let him know about it. And J.P. Morgan sent back a lovely note and sent him a savings bond for my uncle, which was never cashed, by the way. That savings bond remains in our family with J.P. Morgan, with the note from J.P. Morgan. But I
Wow.
think that it's kind of a fun story, but I think it illustrates it illustrates his guts,
Yeah,
and his chutzpah, and his willingness to really take a chance.
as well as his generosity.
Agreed.
Yes. Well, Sandra, we thank you so much. This was very enlightening, and we just really, appreciate your time sharing with us, as we look at Black History Month for 2024, looking at people who, so much deserve recognition, we are just honored to be able to place Mr. Garrett Morgan on the side of our GTA bus. So as we depart today and we go outside and take a look at the bus, we just want to stop and just think that, this is what it's all about. This is giving the people, their flowers, not only when they're here, but also after they're passed on. And so, today we extend our flowers to, in his memory, but we also extend flowers to you as a thank you for what your family has done for our country and our world.
Well, thank you so much. Again, it's my great honor to be with you today and to celebrate Black History Month with you, and to the wonderful people of Greensboro, North Carolina. A city that has such a rich history in its own right, and a place that I have visited and enjoyed. Thank you again for picking, my grandfather to be on your buses. I'm just thrilled and delighted, and I join my family in thanking you.
Thank you. And whenever you visit Greensboro next time, let us know, and we will definitely take you for a ride on that bus.
Hooray. I look forward to that. Thank you.